Hello, this is Robert Wright. This is my project for Systems Administration class for FIT. So my project proposal originally stated that I wanted to solve the problem of hosting multiple web pages on my home server without having to obtain a static IP address. Getting killed with web hosting fees. And as a secondary goal, I wanted to also be able to run what's called web services from my home PC. And while I've been doing this project, I've kind of modified my goals to actually place the web services as the priority goal of my project. What I did is I had an extra box. I downloaded Windows Server 2012 R2 from the DreamSpark website. I installed the Windows Server on my extra box, and I've succeeded actually in being able to run web services from my home server, my dedicated server, just down Comcast cable, which is great. My IP address changes on a regular basis, but after doing the research, that's a very easily fixable problem. There's dynamic DNS services out there where you can register your IP address, and what it will do, it will give you a static IP address it will maintain the target IP address, which is your home IP address, even when your home IP address changes on a regular basis. Anyways, let's get into web services. So I'm not sure if you know what web services are. I'm involved in a second master's degree at Arizona State University. Last spring I had a class called Distributed Software Development, and it dealt with a subject called SOA, or Service-Oriented Architecture. And what web services are, they're small applications that run on dedicated servers that an external client can call into, have that application run, and have that application do real work, and then that application goes ahead and transmits the resulting data back to the client. Here's the Wikipedia definition of web service, and really the best way to explain about web services is to give you an example. Orbit's web page, or any other kind of travel website, what they are is actually a framework. And this framework, when you enter your departure and your destination, airports, the dates you want to leave on, and whatever else you want to enter into the boxes, what it does is once you hit submit, it sends that information out to a whole bunch of different web servers, and each one of these web servers would return the information on different flights. Now every airline has their own dedicated web server running these web services that do searches on their particular airline. So say United Airlines, Orbitz would send this information out via a protocol called SOAP. It's a very simple text packet that runs over HTTP. So this text packet goes to the web server, the web services on the web server at United Airlines. United Airlines, their little application does a search for available seating and ticket prices and so on, and just returns that information back to Orbitz. Now United Airlines would do it, American Airlines would do it, Delta would do it, and every other airline that actually fits the criteria of flying to that destination. Each one of these airlines will return their data, and then Orbitz, as the framework client, would just go ahead and gather up that information and display it on their web page. And so that's basically what web services do. Amazon Web Services, you may be familiar with Amazon Web Services. Amazon is the largest provider of web services. There's so many things on the internet and on the web and in our daily lives that actually run on web services. The internet time on your computer is a web service. It's that kind of information that web services provide. Typically, a single web service is a very simple operation. If you, as a client, are looking to do a complex calculation or a complex set of calculations, what will happen is that the client application, the web page itself, or the framework, that it will break that calculation or that service up into a bunch of different and smaller, simple calculations to so that each one of these bits of this complex application that you're trying to run can run as a simple application on whatever web service that you're trying to access, if that makes sense. So I'll show you how this works. So here's a basic overview of a web service. So if you come over here, application developer, right there, that'll be the client. That'll be Orbit's framework. And then here's a service provider. So this would be United Airlines. And so these services are accessible via ASP.NET services. I believe that ASP and .NET are the ones, I believe they're the ones that are initially really put the effort into development. But these are accessible through Java services also. So ASP.NET, WCF, which is called Windows Communication Foundation, which is a .svc. That's the extension, and it's accessible through SOAP. There's another version of WCF services, and these WCF services, again, these are the actual web services. So you can communicate across from the client to the service, or the client to United Airlines, as an example, potentially, via this protocol called SOAP, and another protocol called RESTful. And RESTful is a very short and very abbreviated protocol, whereas SOAP has a header and a tail, an HTTP header and a tail, and some other stuff. RESTful doesn't actually have that. It really just sends a small text request. And as I stated, Java, you can actually write web services in Java also. So the way this works is that Orbit's would come up with a business plan, and they would try to begin to build their framework, and then based on what kind of services they want to offer, say they want to search for hotels, or they want to search for cars, or they want rental cars, or they want to search for flights, or so on and so forth, out in the there are these things called service brokers. And what happens is that whenever a third party, let's say United Airlines or some other third party, develops a web service of what they believe it could be a useful web service, like telling the time, returning the time to your computer, something like that, or doing some kind of stock translation and sending that information back to your computer. That itself could be a web service, or looking up the price of gold at that instant, in time when you want it. That could be a web service. So what happens is you get these third party individuals that develop these web services, and then they register their web services with these service brokers, and the service broker keeps it in the database registry. What they do is they add the information of how to get to that service, and they add the description of the service and what the service does, and so on and so forth. So Orbit's, when they're building their framework, and they're looking for car rentals and flights and hotels, they ping the service brokers and find out what's available when it comes to who provides services for those particular things that they want to look up. And then the service broker returns that information, and then Orbit's designs into their framework that information on how to communicate with those particular services. So that service broker is only really there for a very short period of time. So once the application is built and it's up and running, then Orbit communicates directly with these third-party service providers, say United Airlines or budget rental car or whatever. So that's the basic definition of a web service. So when I took the class, I was very, very interested in this, and there's still a lot of money to be made in this, and this is all about taking the workload off of your computer and into the cloud. These are typically cloud services. So I wanted to implement this on my home web server. So the first step is to write the web service. So this was an application that I wrote for my class, and the assignment was just to manipulate some XML files and as a service, and then return the resulting XML files to the calling client, or the calling page, web page. So this is all done in Visual Studio, and I'll just show. I'll show you. This is the code for the service itself, and this is the code for the service itself here. These are the particular service. So add hotel right here. Up here would have been XML key, but I'll show you what all this stuff is here in a minute. And then this was the web page that was designed for it. And so I wanted to use this application because I had already written it. I know it worked. I got graded on it. It passed muster for the school server ASU, so I knew it functioned correctly, and I didn't want to have to rewrite anything. I just wanted to get the web server on my home box up and running. So anyways, I used this this assignment to get the web server done. And what I'll show you next is I'll transfer over to the web server monitor. Yeah, this is actually part 2. I wanted to show you this before we went over to the Windows server. This is my home router, and I wanted to show you this port forwarding. So what I'm doing is I'm forwarding any incoming HTTP which is destined for port 85, and what it does, it translates it internally down to port 80 and ships it off to my internal 192.168.1.103, which is the Windows server. So what you do is you'll see in subsequent videos that I append port 85 to the back end of my IP address, and it will automatically ship it off to the Windows server. All right, so this is part 2. This is Windows Server 2012 R2, and we'll open up the Server Manager. So here's the Server Manager. Again, I had a second, I had an extra PC box that I built. It had an older motherboard in it, and one of the original i7 quad-core processors. But it's a relatively powerful processor, so it runs the server pretty well. Once you get the server basic installation installed, to run these web services, they run on what's called the Internet Information Services from Microsoft, and you add it as a role. I'll show you, it's this right here, this little highlighted, this IIS. This is the tab for it. But if we go back to dashboard, I'll show you how to do it. So if you add roles and features, let's see if I can do this. Next, okay, server selection, and here you check this box here, web server IIS, and you open it up and make sure that the rest of this stuff is installed. Web server, security, management tools, and then you'll go to the next. So these are server roles, but then you go to the features, and you make sure that 4.5 is installed, and along with .NET Framework, ASP.NET, and WCF. That's the Windows Communication Foundation that I mentioned before. And that's about it for the required features for IIS. So we'll hit cancel because I've already installed it. So we'll bring up the IIS user interface, and the IIS user interface you can actually add to your Windows machine, your regular PC. If you go into add programs and features and you select the add or remove Windows components, it has the boxes there to add the IIS. So in the previous part 1, I showed you Visual Studio. Well, once you write the application in Visual Studio to test it, you want to test it on your local server on your desktop machine that you're writing the application on, but you have to install IIS. So that when you hit debug or you hit run for release, it will actually load on your local machine on your desktop. So on this here, if you click Tools and you come down to Internet Information Services Manager, it brings this up. And then if you click this over here on the left, here we go. Do not show that again. No. And so this interface here is the same one, basically the same one that you would have on your desktop if you were to install this. So to get this running, this is the default. This is the sites folder, and this was the default website that comes up that's installed with IIS services. And so what you can do is what I did. The application that I showed you in Visual Studio, it actually comprised of two different sections. One was a client page, and one was the services itself. So you design the services, and then you design a client page. And for the assignment we called it a try it page. And the client page, it's literally just a web page that has the hooks in it to call the service and send information to the service and see and receive the results from the service. So to add both of those to this IIS manager on the web server, I added two. These are folders actually. Originally they're folders. When you first make them, they're folders, and then you say convert to application. So I'll do that. Run through that. So if you make a service, you right-click on default web page, and you add application, and then you add you type in the name, you add it to the default application pool, and then you define the physical path, which would be to, I put mine in. I made a thing called My Sites. So there's the page folder, and you'll see that's right there. And here's the services folder, and those are right there. So if I open up my page folder, this is what is published when, actually it's not showing files, so what I'll do, anyway, so this is how you set it up. And what I'll do is I'll open up the Explorer and I'll show you what's inside of those. So here's My Sites again, and page. And so this is actually the web page, the ASP.NET web page. You'll see this the extension ASPX, and that would be on. I don't know if it'll open with from here. No, it won't. So anyways, so this is the web page, and you'll see in a minute we'll open that up. And then here's the services, and this is actually the service that this XML file modification service, and this is what it entails. App data folders where you put any kind of text files or application data that's either generated or is required to run the thing. And then the rest of the stuff is all the service binaries and things. There is a web.config file in which you can set restrictions and authorization and access to who can access the site and the services and for security and things like that. So we'll close that. So anyways, what you do is you right-click, you add an application, you do that, and it generates these two service, a page and a server. Well, you don't need the page if you're actually running just a stripped-down web server that's running services. You actually wouldn't have the page. Again, this page is only here so I can demonstrate that this thing works. So the only thing on a web server that's running web service you would have is you would have multiple files, and they wouldn't be called services. Each name would be representative of what service it was. So we'll close that, and I'll show you. I'll just run it on the local machine here of what the thing is supposed to look like. We'll do full screen. I've already opened it up once. So what it will look like, so the IIS, just to verify that you have it installed, it's not coming up here, but if you just type in localhost, if you type in localhost and you get this page, you know that you've installed IIS correctly. And then to get to the page that actually that you can call the web services that we just looked at, the page, you would call localhost and then the page, which is the file, and then default .aspx, and default is like is the same thing as index.html. So you do that, and this is the web page. And I'll show you that this whole thing works on the local host. So basically, this is actually two different services, the top half and the bottom half. But I'll just demonstrate the top half. So this over here, this is the existing XML file that we used, and I'll demonstrate the bottom half. So this is the existing XML file, and you can see that the top, this is what the XML file here is a list of 10 hotels in Australia, 10 5-star or 4-star hotels in Australia. And the goal of this one particular service was to add an additional hotel to this XML file in the same format, with the same indentation, with the same encoding as a standard XML file. So this was the existing XML file that we start with, and you can see the top hotel is called 188 Hotel. And if you come over here, you can either add your own hotel, or you can use the default one, and use the default one by not entering anything into these boxes. So if all these boxes are empty, it just adds this top default hotel. So we'll leave them empty. We'll hit Add Hotel, and there you go. And so what this theoretically did is that it sent this existing hotel file out to the service in the services directory, along with the data from this hotel. That service added the default values from this new hotel, on top of the existing XML file, and returned the XML file to the client, which is this web page. And you can see the 188 hotel, which used to be on the top, is now down here, and the default hotel is up here. So it was a success, and it actually went out, and again, it went and communicated with the web service, parsed the data, transmitted the new hotel data, and the service added it to the hotel. If we go up here to the top, what it does is it uses the existing hotel file, and you'll see that all of these hotels have different nodes. So you have a name node, there's a name node, a contact node, phone node, email node, address node, and so on. So what you can do, this one up here, it will parse that hotel XML XML file and just return those nodes. All you have to do is type in the node name, and it will match that node and return everything. So if I type in, for instance, name, and it should return only the names of all the hotels in that file. There you go. So it worked. So that means it succeeded. It transmitted the full XML file to the web service. The web service parsed that file, pulled out all the names of all the hotels, and then just returned the names of the hotels from that XML file back to the client. And so that's what a web service does. So the next thing what we'll do is so part one was on my desktop. This is on my secondary web server, PC that I talked about. But it's still on a desktop. So what I'm going to do on the next part is I'm going to take my laptop, and the goal is to access this whole mess from outside of my cable modem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my laptop, I'll plug it into my cell phone, communicate across my cellular network, which is AT&T, which should come into the front of the cable modem, through the router, through port 85, which I forwarded, and into this web server, and then return everything back to my laptop via my cell phone. So I'll do that, and that'll be the last part. So this is my laptop, and what you can't see is that my laptop is connected to my cell phone, a hotspot on my cell phone, which is connected through AT&T, which goes through Comcast, and then comes in through my cable modem, and which is port forwarded to my Windows web server, my services server. So we're going to try this web page. I just tried it, so it should come right back up. So if I put in my IP address, that's my current IP address right there, and then I append port 85 on there, and then we point towards page, which is that application directory, and then we try to bring up it's called default.aspx, and that's the equivalent of index.html. It brings up the page. Now this is being served from the web server, this web page. It's now loaded locally on my machine, but it was served from the web server. In reality, in an actual environment, this page would be served up from other users and other applications, like Orbitz or Expedia or whatever. It wouldn't actually be residing on the same server that the services are on. This would be on a completely different server, and then this web page would just be accessing the services that are on the server. So let's go ahead and try this. If I type in name like I did before, it should bring up all the names in that XML file. There they are. So you saw, I don't know if you noticed, but if up in the tab here, you saw that it went out and talked to that to the web server, and it retrieved this information. And we'll try the add hotel. Same thing. So sure enough, it works. So that ends my demonstration for Systems Admin class for the summer of 2015. Thanks very much.